Hey everybody, I'm Tom Jochim. I run the Modern Workplace domain for Microsoft in the Americas. And today I've got my public sector managing architect here with me, Randy Garcia. And we're going to talk a bit about crisis management and what we're doing in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, but also just in general, some things that our platform can do with regard to standing up remote worker scenarios quickly in the face of some of these disasters that unfortunately we do run into from time to time around the world. So Randy, why don't you just tell us a little bit right out of the gate, what are you doing with the COVID-19 scenario, and what's your world look like today?
Yeah, these are interesting times, Tom. Triage. We have a bunch of public sector customers that are coming to us to do really primarily two things. One is to enable their organizations to telework. So we need to go spread out a little bit and have some social distancing. So it's enabling that work from home scenario. And Teams is proving to be a very secure remote way to interoperate with each other while we're still at home or wherever we are away. The other side, though, with government that's very interesting, in addition to distancing, telework, is government has a concept called continuity of government. So how does the government do their job when this is happening? When something like this is happening, there's an expectation that the government still performs all of its functions, right, and specifically responds to COVID. And so what we're doing is a lot of work with our agencies at the federal, state, local levels on using collaborative technologies like Teams to continue doing their jobs.
That's cool. It's good to see we've got people being agile, especially even in the government, to deal with this situation. So we've talked a bit about how we're adjusting and how these different agencies are adjusting to get work done, the concept of continuity in government. What about utilizing some of our technology, like Teams, for example, in actually facilitating disaster response scenarios? I mean, a lot of times, these things happen, in an earthquake, right, or a tidal wave, or even a hurricane, even if it's predicted. Dealing with the aftermath, is there a way that technology can help us there?
Yeah, I think technology, Tom, in addition to technology, just this emergence of the perfect timing. Cloud computing gives us an elasticity and a resilience that we didn't have before with traditional data centers. And I guess to give an example, every year we have hurricanes along our Gulf Coast in Florida and places like that. So the states, the counties kind of know, hey, we're going to have to respond to hurricanes. But the IT people didn't have the budget to build IT centers that can staff thousands and thousands of people that may augment their operations when a disaster happens. And I think what's fun with cloud computing is that core capability can always be up and humming, whether it's one person, 10 people working on that in what would be a steady state command center. And then when that season comes, whether it's hurricane season there or here at home in Colorado, it might be wildfire season. They know it's going to come. Those professionals know how to do their job. Wouldn't it be really cool if those templates for how to do their job are already set up, and then we could just name the item? So maybe it's a hurricane called Katrina, and now instead of a generic template, we call it that. And that can scale from 10 people to 100 people to 1,000 people very quickly. And then we can scale down as that disaster becomes resolved and we go back to steady state.
Cool. That's a great capability. So, and I know your team's been working on this, right? So you have, this concept of templates that you can stand up, for example, in these scenarios quickly. Can you give us an example, like what's included in a template? What would it look like in Teams?
Why not a Teams-enabled command center? Why don't we have a way to, instead of visiting multiple different tools and technologies and web pages, why don't we bring everything together in a team paradigm? And so when I show up to work, I go to my team. And so what they did was basically envisioned what they call the 80-20 rule. What we find with our customers is, for like organizations, like a state emergency operations center, almost every state does those functions the same way. They know how to do that. There's very good training on that. Same with FEMA and how they do disaster response. And so we kind of came up with this 80-20 rule. If 80% of the roles and functions and activities are really the same, Why don't we automate the provisioning of those teams when we come to a customer? So instead of a blank sheet of paper when you stand up teams, why not have templates that reflect your organization? Then the fun becomes that 20% that maybe Microsoft never thought of. Maybe as you get
Right.
to that organization, that 20%, kind of the art side of things that says, hey, we've got some creative ways we're going to do this. Now let's add to it. So this whole Teams Enabled Command Center, scalable from something like a county or state emergency operations center, all the way to our federal customers who, again, do this day in and day out.
So give me a sense of timeline. I mean, if you would say we had an earthquake tomorrow in Seattle, where I happen to virtually be sitting today, um, how quickly could we stand something up like this and have it up and running and functioning for the command center operation to deal with that
I already know
crisis?
that. Virtually any event, we could have that site stood up instantaneously. So again, I talk about it humming in the background. It's kind of out there on idle, and it's called generic earthquake or generic whatever the type of event is. And once we name that item, once say it's FEMA or maybe it's a state event, we call it the such and such flooding. We can name that disaster, and all the templates are there, and then those permissions across the organizations can be set up. All those are just part of the governance that we can work on that, because we know how to do this. We do this every year, we do this every season, and whether it's an event that we can kind of see coming, like a hurricane, we see that a couple of days out, or even an instant event like a wildfire springs up, we could turn that on virtually instantly, and again scale that from the small size that it is to something like we had with California here a couple of years ago, where we had thousands and thousands of responders. So yeah, I think quite an amazing capability compared to our old paradigm of having a data center and having to stand that up each time.
That's awesome. So basically, if you're a state or local agency or even a federal agency, you've got E5, you've got teams up and running. These are really easy to just apply these templates, get it up and running. And then of course you've got the mobile functionality too, already automatically built in. Because I imagine a lot of this is mobile interaction too. You're not sitting in front of your desktop, or at least a portion of the workforce isn't. So it sounds like that's pretty quick and easy to set up.
Absolutely. I think with the emergence of edge computing, the investment that we're seeing in 5G, we've even seen military units use solutions like Teams in very austere places that we didn't know it could be taken. And so they're using the chat functionality, they're using some of the functionality to share objects and documents for shared understanding in a time where previously a mobile individual might be kind of blind as they couldn't see what was going on. Now we can either push things down to that individual or pull information from them when they're on the scene responder. They're the individual who sees better than anybody. So that's pretty exciting to enable that edge user as much as somebody at the state level or the regional level.
That's awesome. Awesome, Randy. Well, hey, we're going to wrap up, but thanks for joining me on this. It's been great to hear a little bit about what we're doing on the public sector side of the fence. Of course, we're also doing a lot in commercial too around these remote worker scenarios. So our phones are ringing off the hook here at Microsoft, and we're here to help. But thanks again, Randy. Appreciate your time, and take care of yourself and be healthy.
Thank you, Tom.